Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Friday, the 13th of November. Spooky, as it were. Starting really late today. I will just say for the accountability section, I started off with the smallest of intentions to work on my server yesterday just to get the email end-to-end encryption system I had set up running on CentOS, which with security enhanced Linux enabled and enforcing by default, became just such a nightmare, frankly. And this is what I've always heard about security enforced Linux: is that it is this idea that the NSA brought out, and in theory it is smart, but in practicality it is like just not efficient or effective for an average user. Although maybe an average user doesn't ever run into it. There's a Microsoft version of it too that's not enabled by default for the exact same reasons, because it just sandboxes basically everything from everything else, which just doesn't really work for most people. Here, I'm not going to be able to play a private match, so I'm going to have to re-roll this almost certainly. Havencraft, Bloodcraft, and 3 Shadowcraft or Portalcraft victories, and just 2 victories in general. Um, and we need to play Havencraft and Bloodcraft anyways, so that lines up very nicely. To get these 2 extra animated cards that we're gonna get for these couple weeks, or these 6 days. So yeah, I was just gonna set up the email, and then at some point, I made some small tweak, from what I recall, and I think it really was just like an incredibly small tweak, um, that managed to just break all of the darker server setups that I had. In fact, or at least it seemed that way. I think I probably was not figuring out what the real problem was until much later. I'm not sure I even have it fully figured out, but at the end of the day, it kind of just deleted everything all again, and this is the problem. I did realize that I wasn't installing the stable version of Nextcloud, which, yeah, so all of my Darker Compose scripts, I'm gonna see if I can go and say, hey, install the stable versions of these instead of the latest versions, because that could be part of the problem. There is definitely a desire here to try and get more stability out of these systems. It's nice in theory to have um, in theory it's nice to have the idea around um, around using Docker to automate the process of building servers and setting up servers. That's fine, but in the end of the day, we need also to have stability. Maisie Red Riding Hood. Interesting. Seems like we're getting more art for older cards a lot of times than these, or it's just there's a ridiculous amount of art in them. Of course, they're all censored at this point, even in the Japanese version, as they're trying to target a younger audience. Which maybe they've got some player feedback on that too. Maybe they got the numbers to prove that kids play these collectible card games more than anybody. Although at a certain point, if you have a game like Shadowverse that has slightly lewd art, and a bunch of kids are playing it, a bunch of teenagers are playing it, and then you try to change your game so it doesn't have slightly lewd art, didn't you just betray the audience that liked it in the first place? Like, I remember myself uh, as a teenage boy, and definitely I would want to have seen and uh, watched and played games that were more mature than what I imagine a content creator would believe was appropriate. There, I think my watchdog just reset my server. I mean my router. Yeah, there's still definitely a case of my internet just getting slower and slower. That seems to be a problem. That, and at a certain point, it's just gonna be the new normal. It seems like, where the internet's just getting worse and worse and worse, and it's not gonna work one way or the other. See, do I have, like, the only thing I could do, I suppose, is I could stop the music playback, which, alright, let's just take that. No more Nightbot song playback going forward. Like, we'll just live without that until we get better internet. Because that does seem like that was taking more time than it really should. Or more bandwidth than it should. So yeah, I spent just like all yesterday working on my server. Just problem after problem after problem. It was such a nightmare. Also, it kept me mostly lying in bed, which that might be a good thing in the long run, because that very possibly like staying in bed for a day might give my hips some time to heal up, and just my back and just my entire body some time to rest. Although at certain points, staying in bed all day also just leads to unhealthier problems. So yeah, that's pretty much the accountability section. I did play one episode of The Watchmaker, which is this game where you have a timing mechanism where you just get older and older as you play. You can get life back on, like years back on your life, but every minute is a year, effectively. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay. Do that. So yeah, you are mostly just platforming, and probably need to use the time slowdown mechanic quite a bit to wander around this clockwork gear tower area. At least that's what the first level is, and then you have this boss battle that I just could not figure it out. I at one point had to use the mouse and keyboard to see if it was just literally a glitch, because the game is pretty glitchy also, on top of everything else. So yeah, at the end it turned out that the boss battle was actually more a case of you really only had maybe 20 to 40 seconds to run around and convince the enemy to go into a specific phase in which you could then attack them to knock off like some bombs off of them that you can then fling back at them. And it just seems like the game is lacking polish, lacking animation. It's just kind of lacking everything.
I soar the skies in the name of justice. Yum-yums to fill my tum-tums. Lessons upon punishment.
Okay. Do we want to evolve anything? Or do we want to just leave it? I mean, we could evolve something, certainly. But yeah, after that first level, that's when I started working on my server and took a little bit of break between that, and then that was like the rest of the entire day. The good news is I think I mostly have it working at the moment, or at least working well enough.
What's for din din?
Really all kinds of problems that CentOS and SE and Linux seem to have. For instance, the like curl OpenSSL cipher set that I was using on a very stripped down version of curl, which curl doesn't usually use OpenSSL. It uses its own internal NSS cipher suites, which I know that probably means much of anything to anybody, but at the core of it, what it means is that a command I was being able to run on a very stripped down version of Linux on DDWRT literally is not supported by CentOS 7, and like even CentOS 7's software seems to be a couple of years older than it really should be. I know they're moving to CentOS 8, but that also didn't install. See, and at a certain level, I think there is this very possibility that there's this very real possibility that CentOS, as kind of like the free version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, has fallen behind the wayside, and it's not really the software you should be using even in a corporate environment, which I wouldn't be surprised if that is exactly the case, and that corporate environments just have all this legacy software and all this old software, and that's the reason why let's go ahead and evolve Bane and get rid of this character. So yeah, I'm not 100% sold. And at the core of it, if you have the source code, it's exactly the same procedure to build for a CentOS Red Hat Linux RPM as it is to build a Debian package, as long as the libraries are supported. So once you get one step higher, as far as your understanding on how to build packages and install packages in Linux, then you're perfectly fine at that point to... I'm just gonna find like 3 things to throw in here without it actually making any real changes, just for safety's sake. And at the core of it, still can't play this deck. I must have missed something later on. Yeah, didn't look all the way through all the cards, which really goes to show just how uninterested I am in really fixing these things or building these decks. I like the idea that CentOS is really, really small to start with. I like the idea that since I'm using Docker, I'm not really getting deep into the dive of it. I kind of theoretically like the idea that it has security enhanced Linux enabled by default, because the only way anybody's ever going to learn how to use that is through a lot of just banging your head against things. And in all fairness, almost everything you do on a server, you're running what the super user do or the sudo command. Anyway, so once you get it all set up, or once you're making any changes, it's always with sudo and running as root anyways. And you barely run into a situation where you can't change a file or access a file as super user because of security enhanced Linux. So on the core of it, I would totally say no sane user should be running their desktop on CentOS. But on the core of it, I'm really just barely using it at all. And I do like the idea of Docker and Docker Compose keeping a lot of these things. If this was a Debian regular LAMP stack, then I would have had to install Apache or Nginx directly onto CentOS, and that potentially would have added a level of corruption on the first time that something bad would happen, and then every time Nextcloud crashed, it would have been a much longer process to just say, okay, is there any way for me to clean up these files and get rid of all the settings, or am I going to have to just uninstall and reinstall the entire operating system? That was my Debian server in a nutshell. So it was just like, all right, this has been touched now, this has been touched. It's very much like brain surgery. You just slip and you touch the wrong thing, and then you've paralyzed someone forever, potentially. So the sandboxing idea, and that's what security enhanced Linux at its core is doing anyways, is it's sandboxing everything on the core operating system, and then Docker is creating a second sandbox on top of that. But yeah, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done with that, but it's work I don't want to do. 1 damage to a random enemy follower. To the fence. Play this. And this.
Like in your own sense, repent.
Best of luck to you.
Back straight, eyes forward.
That. Probably gonna lose. Alright, so let's start talking about video game news. There's a couple of things I want to talk about. First of all, there was a swatting event at Ubisoft Montreal. What it seems like is it was a hoax. Earlier it was being briefly reported as a hostage situation. It seems like it was completely a hoax though. How much of that has to do with Ubisoft, who knows? It could be certainly a disgruntled employee they called it in. It could just be a crazy Ubisoft fan / hater. Either are very possible possibilities. It could just be a random person in general.
I'm done sticking my head in the clouds. The skies in the name of justice. Punishment.
All right.
Told you to leave.
Like a falling leaf.
So yeah, I wanted to mention that. And then I wanted to mention Jay Brushwood, brother of Brian Brushwood, who is the host of the Night Attack podcast that I convinced to shout me out for like one episode and literally got me no views. Frankly, it's a mid-tier podcast. It's fun. I enjoy it. A lot of times. Sometimes it's gotten a little repetitive. It is one of these podcasts that has started to get to the point where they just get together once a week and they just play a game made up for each other, and they have like nothing new to say. They've been going for a very long time. This doesn't have much to do with Brian Brushwood. Jay Brushwood, though, was a senior animator, artist, generalist, and gnome, according to his LinkedIn profile. What I find most interesting is he went to Full Sail Energy University. He had, I believe, if I recall correctly, gone into a coma because of alcohol abuse. He was in Austin, Texas. I'm putting all of this in the past tense because he passed away. He was in a coma. I'm not sure he ever even came out of the coma, but he was related somewhat heavily to the video game world in that he was a 3D animator for American McGee's Alice in 2000, Return to Castle Wolfenstein, Doom 3, Doom Classic, Enemy Territory, Duke Nukem 3D, Call of Duty Black Ops, Duke Nukem Forever, PlanetSide, and Star Citizen. So while whatever you may think of a lot of these games, he was someone that that was fairly accomplished in the video game world. And unfortunately, we just never get a lot of a lot of these obituaries. People just die and people forget and don't mention it. It's questionable whether American McGee, for instance, who has this live stream, it's questionable whether he knows that Jay Brushwood died. It's questionable if half of his co-workers know that he's died because he'd been in a coma. He'd been on sick leave. Here you can see he's worked for a decent number of the Texas developers. Here he got an associate's degree, which I believe is less than a bachelor's degree, at Full Sail University, which I don't think Full Sail is particularly a great degree program. So it really goes to show you don't need a ton of education. You just need to know the right people almost in everything. And he went to the University of Texas of Austin for like 3 years, and he left business school to make games and then get a degree. So it really goes to show when you're looking at it from like a LinkedIn perspective. But yeah, so he died, and we may see obituaries from him later, but yeah, I don't, there's not a lot to really other say other than this is a great example of how the mainstream video game journalists don't do their job well enough. And I hate to go into this rant because somebody died, but it is really a great example, because this is an argument that anybody from any like political leaning can probably agree on, is that they just don't do their jobs well enough to be in touch, to know if somebody died. Now, in all fairness, to have your ear to the ground for that is a little bit difficult, because if the family doesn't know who to contact, that's fine. But it would have been very easy in this case particular to have pre-written an obituary, and you'd think something like Gamasutra would do that, maybe even TechRaptor. But you could have easily pre-written the obituary for that. I can probably list a decent number of very old Japanese game developers right now that you obviously should have pre-written obituaries ready to go. And when you're in a situation where you know a person's in a coma, you don't want to come off untactful, but you could say, hey, keep me informed. You could easily pre-write a article talking about him being in a coma. That article was never talked about either. The only reason I know any of this is because his own brother has a podcast, and so that goes to show there is almost certainly hundreds, if not thousands, of game developers out there that just die, just disappear, just get sick, and a bigger issue probably points to the fact that the video game industry, the corporations, the businesses themselves don't really report on these things. It would be fairly easy for 3D Realms or whoever he was actually working for. It doesn't actually say in Austin, Texas, but there've been his job before that was Cloud Imperium Games. It would have been easy enough for them to have tweeted out something enough that mainstream video game journalists would have been able to get that story and say something. And yet, they didn't. Deal 1 damage, I guess. Well, half the number of valid ammunitions destroyed this match. Oh, destroyed. Well, that's a different number.
You are done for.
A painless death is the most one shot, one absolution.
What do we have here?
So yeah, there's not anything else you can really say. It is definitely a caution story, I would say, Jay Brushwood's life about dealing with addiction and probably stress, and how being in the video game industry probably encourages and increases. I won't say 100% causes stress and addiction, but it certainly does not help much. And from what I hear, his employer actually were fairly supportive, but it probably was too late at that point. It would have been his early career when he would have needed the support. He would have needed to be had early intervention, I imagine, much when he was just a new employee. And there definitely is a culture of drinking in the video game development world that needs to be stopped. But yeah, it is a real caution story of just don't get into alcohol. Even the thought that alcoholism can lead to being in a coma is probably a thought that not most people even know can happen. And that's exactly what happened to him. It's just like massive alcoholism. I'm not sure he ever did drugs. I can't fully remember the story. But yeah, the culture of drinking in Texas in general is probably a little too high. In the United States in general is probably a little too high. But in the video game industry, we know is way too high also. I tried to look up for an obituary or Google anything about Jay Brushwood, and his LinkedIn was like the only thing that would even come up. Everything else is just talking about Brian Brushwood, which at a certain point that probably stinks for people if you have a more internet centric, I won't particularly say more successful, but more internet forward celebrity as a family member. Google tends to tends to ignore normal people, and I think Jay Brushwood would be a great example of a normal person in Google's terms. Speaking of Google, like, not very much video game related, but they seem to be running out of money because they've announced that they're not going to let you do full quality photo uploads to Google Photos. Meanwhile, Samsung Gallery stopped their service also, and so it seems like we're beginning to see a lot of services where once it was free to to upload things. Now they want to charge, or they just want to go out of business completely. And everybody very possibly needs to either go to Microsoft OneDrive, which I don't think everybody wants to do, or which I think OneDrive probably changes or charges too. Dropbox charges. I'm not sure that there's anything that doesn't charge. Really?
Uncharted desert awaits.
So, yeah, like, this would be the perfect time to get Nextcloud to work, but I'm not sure there's any easy way to get Nextcloud to work at all. There is a Raspberry Pi, like, script that supposedly would just install Nextcloud, and maybe if you don't try to install any of the apps, it seems like that was in part of the problem, is that my Postgres SQL database somehow lost some of the databases, the information it needed. I don't know how that would have really happened, but I didn't have any like backup solution there, and I'm still not 100% sure I have a backup solution there that is secure. Okay.
What do we have here?
Breach of contract, huh?
Go with the wind. Got to roam in style.
Let's see how all this works. Playing all these amulets for no reason. Moving on, video game wise, we've got a game here called Neon Parasites, which looks like it's a platforming game. Seems to be player versus player. $6.79, English only. Well, actually it says single player, split screen, shared PvP. I don't think either one of those Haven Craft cards decks are gonna win. In all fairness, you just saw me not really give a flying flip as far as making decks that would win, so that's should be of no surprise to anyone. Here we have Gamasutra. Police say hoax emergency prompted a Montreal Ubisoft studio scare. No threat was identified. You can see this was updated at 12:46 Pacific Standard Time, and then updated again at 2:01. And then there's an original story, 12:30. And then 12:46. Here you can see a lot of just different stories being told in the chaos and confusion, which, yeah, that certainly is part of the problem with any kind of breaking news scenario, is that you do have a high chance of that happening. Apparently Gamasutra's down. Here we have a very weird story from TechReview. Capcom is looking to hire tournament winners for game development. Now, as good as a tournament winner of a Capcom fighting game tournament, I imagine, would be, they really don't have enough to offer as far as employability. There is a possibility, certainly, that there are some game developers out there that also can win tournaments. But the only thing you can really hire them for would be, you see in here we've got a reward and a pack.
I pray that you will be freed from suffering.
Like, the only thing you can really hire them for is game testers. And inherently, the problem with that is they have never found a way to make game testers a job that pays well and treats its employees well. There's just far too high of a demand of people, young people, that think they can break into the video game development world by being a game tester, which is never true. You're wasting your effort. I could see you being a game tester if you're in school, if you're getting a degree plan, if that really is the thing, if you're learning how to program at the moment. It makes sense there. But if you already know how to program, or you already know as much as you're going to know until you get into the real world and in a specific office and start seeing how that specific office programs things, which can be, I imagine, wildly different from company to company, you want to be a low-level programmer, debugger, commentator, even if there's a position like that, where you are actually touching the code. If you're just playing games all day, just looking for bugs, those people are treated pretty terribly. In fairness, working in the video game world, everybody's treated pretty terribly, but there's just no path to getting promoted as a game tester. And so then it becomes this weird scenario where Capcom, clearly they're an idiot here. Like, they're taking people potentially out of the thing that does them the best good, which would be keeping them as game players, as tournament players. I could see maybe it's maybe this is an idea around the concept of giving more retired tournament winners, because I imagine a lot of tournament winners win maybe one or two tournaments for a couple years and then they phase out. So if it were kind of like the equivalent of taking a NFL professional player and turning them into commentators, that would kind of make sense. But honestly, tournament winners would do much better to be commentators than game developers. The whole thing is they're just not qualified for it. It's not what they would have been spending their lives on. Right. Let's go ahead and evolve this. It's also worth mentioning, let's see, the Capcom is like Resident Evil and Monster Hunter franchise. In a weird way, this might be a like Tiger Mom style Asian idea that we're not going to hire programmers at all unless they're tournament winners, which might be a weird way of Capcom just saying we're not going to hire tournament winners. Either that, or they are trying to justify hiring a single person who had won a tournament. But like a weird way to go about your business, certainly. It would be the equivalent of saying, I'm only going to hire an accountant who also has won a triathlon. At a certain point, what you're really just saying is you're not going to hire an accountant. Or you want to hire one specific accountant that managed to do both. Let's see. We could play that. We can get Storm. Let's go and evolve and do 4 damage. As a gamer, I would much prefer that there would be just better programmers at Capcom. Capcom certainly will be a better company always with more programmers, as any company would be better with better programmers. There's never been a game we've seen where I felt like it was just perfectly programmed and it needed something else, like a better animator or a better writer. There actually probably have been some games that where that would have been the case, but I would have never been able to recognize it. I could argue like Yandere Simulator, for instance, and they tried that, but he was too much of a control freak. They tried to replace him as the programmer, and just have him be the writer, the scripter, the one with the ideas, and it still didn't really work because there's just a lack of realistic possibility that he'll ever finish a thought. Or let's see.
It is not my place to show mercy. Resign yourself.
Oh, why'd it have to be a clear
Let's
day?
see. Moving on, Gamasutra has an article here. Valve adds an extensive developer commentary to Half-Life Alyx. I finished Portal Stories Mel. I think I already talked about that, but yeah. I still don't think you can play Half-Life Alyx though outside of VR. If anything, I would argue that a lot of what Half-Life Alyx is a stubborn argument on the part of Valve to say, no, you actually do need a VR headset. No, that this actually is going to be the future of gaming, and anyone who's not on board is going to get left behind. And there's just going to be a lot of people not on board. It really doesn't change the scenario much if Valve released only VR games going forward, if their commitment to it was just so insane that they were willing to do that. I hate that there's these tiny in-game scenarios where you have to just play Ward. I think that is the case, as we need to probably, next time I rebuild decks, heavily emphasize on the idea of more Ward characters, more defense. Just stretch the game out as long as possible. Here we have a game called Truants. Miss young girl claims she's been forcibly treated for video game addictions. Can you save these kids trapped in a behavior center and find out why they're being targeted by dark forces? This looks like this is mostly a text game with some windows. It does touch upon something that I think will be a real scenario at some point, in which we'll start to see China scooping up children of people they don't like, the minorities, the Muslim minorities and such, and Hong Kongers, and saying that their kids suffer from video game addiction and throwing them basically in concentration camps. So we've already seen one instance of that. But this game doesn't really do anything more on top of that idea, and we can see it's 99 cents, and it's probably just a low effort story that doesn't really go anywhere, because you would want some subversion of expectations, I would say, more than anything, on that kind of story. You wouldn't want it to be just exactly as it seems. Here we can show the problem with being so zoomed in on Steam, that the top banner advertisement is, which I'm not even showing at the moment, is a pain. Here we've got a fighting game sale going on. And there is a decent level of fighting games that, yeah, see, fighting game sale, that's what it says over here. See, that's weird because this is at 100%, but it's an image, so the image is not accounting for the 125% dots per inches change that I made. So the pictures tend to be bigger, which is kind of the problem, is that fonts can be fairly well programmed in HTML5
Now furious.
to fit the right space, but websites still seem to not be able to be programmed as well, or they aren't being programmed as well. So let's see what we've got here. This is a apparently large emphasis on streaming, mana rights, election year knockout. They're letting some pretty garbage games, Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, be involved. And then some AAA games, if we can not highlight anything. We've got Injustice 2, Ultimate Capcom versus 3, Naruto, Storm Revolution, Ultimate Ninja Storm Revolution, Jump Force, Guilty Gear XX, Accent Core, Street Fighter 5, another Naruto game, Killer Instinct for $9.99. That's probably good offer. River City Ransom Underground. I want to look at that one. Dead or Alive 6, which isn't on my wish list. Castle Crashers. Brawlhalla X The Walking Dead is free to play. I think that's a multiplayer free to play game. Brawlhalla is probably the closest thing to a Smash Brothers game that makes sense.
I soar the skies in the name of justice.
Let's see.
You are done for.
Like in your own sin. Repent.
Oh, damn.
Sorry, had to play. We have Lethal League Blaze, Skullgirls for $2.99, the original Skullgirls, which I think there's been Blaze Cross Tag Battle, Streets of Rage 4, Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection, that one wasn't reviewed very well, King of Fighters 13, Slap City, half of these are Smash Brothers clones, half of these aren't. King of Crabs is free to play. Some of these are joke games. Soul Calibur with Geralt of Rivia on it. WWE Battlegrounds, mixed reviews. Dragon Ball Fighter Z for $9.59 is a good deal. Nidhogg is kind of a hard one to justify if you don't have someone to play with. A lot of these run into that problem. Another Guilty Gear, another Street Fighter. Under Night in Birth EXC Late CLR. Still $16.74. A lot of these fighting games never go on sale. Like here I have Blaze Blue Calamity Trigger in my outcome. Guacamole for $5.99 is not a bad deal. It's 70% off, but it's not a great deal either. Here we have something called The Last Blade 2. Dive Kick Edition. Interesting title. Alright, Rush. Finish that. And then hit that.
Twilight.
And then hit that. Let's see, we've got Acceleration of Sakuri, which I already own. Bleeding Edge. Don't recognize that one. Retimed. River City Ransom Underground. Injustice 2. Rampage Unite. Some of these games almost certainly also have other versions, older versions that are either fairly discounted at the moment or always discounted. Most of these are, here you have like one that's 84% off, 80% off, 84% off. We're seeing percentage points start to drop. A lot of 75% off, a lot of less than 70% off, where it's not really a good deal at that point. Particularly when you're getting to these like percentage points. I'm seeing like things that are ending in like 49 cents and 79 cents too. Which you normally wouldn't expect that. Can we do anything here? Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Do we want to do 3
Resign yourself.
damage?
Resign yourself.
Hmm. Hmm. So that's a little weird, I would say. Sorry, it went quiet there. Though to have a fighting game sale take place between November 12th and November 16th, when November 25th, 26th, 27th, whenever Black Friday happens, whenever Cyber Monday happens, all of that
May the best swordsman win.
is really only a week after that.
March on!
So are we going to see any major Steam sale this year? Or is this just going to be the year where I can say, hey, I'll just not buy any games? This would be the year where you could certainly correlate the feeling that there aren't that many games out with the fact that you have probably more games than you ever play anyways.
The real battle begins.
Just gonna kill that.
Don't forget this name.
Yeah, there's definitely an argument to be made to say, you know what, everybody's got a great year right now to not buy video games and save their money. I think that same argument probably carries over to 2021 already. The new consoles are out, and clearly there's a large percentage of people still trying to buy new consoles, but there aren't even that many good games. If anything, right now is the perfect time to buy the Switch, because if you have to buy anything, the Switch is the one product that that has a nice game lineup now. Gamma Sutra has this blog, and I just wanted to mention the name, really. Spilt Milk Devlog 06 Fascism Fighters 4000 Part 1.
Get up close and personal, darling.
And, like, this just screams, I'm an SJW. I'm an SJW who needed to write a blog. Like, I have no idea if there actually is a game called Fascism Fighters 4000, or if this is just... Okay, yeah. There is a low-effort, top-down, twin-stick shooter, and that's all these blogs usually are just, hey, let's get somebody to write an article around us, or some video game journalist to talk about us. Let's see. Can we do this? Or can we do this? And then this.
Well done, neighbor.
If I could get this to disappear and change, I'd win. Like, but I think in a couple more turns I'd win, so I'd have to really get this to work way better. Like, I don't think I've ever actually won with a Seraph.
Me whiskers!
No!
I envy you.
Yeah, we can see we're not getting very far very fast. I may have to just play off screen today because I do want to get those animated cards since they're times, but more and more my interest in Shadowverse is pretty bad. My interest in even Destiny Child has gotten pretty bad lately. The tower defense game that they soft launched apparently updated and excluded me from the region, so I couldn't continue playing that, which is fine, whatever. But because it just says there's an update, and I keep trying to see if the update is there, and it's not, so I assume that is just a case of they've region locked the updates to specific stores. But even Destiny Child, I've been so busy, like in a weird way. Like there's not a good reason why I've been so busy, but I've been so busy that I've not been paying a lot of attention to it, and it's a shame because I'm making great progress on it. I am entering the late game phase, if I'm not mid late game at this point.
Prepare to face judgment.
But there's definitely less focus on it, less of it being left running. I have an overage in stamina and an inability to really use up all the stamina in a reasonable time. Banish random enemy. At 5, and then that'd be 4. Let's see.
Doesn't this land just fill you with reverence? 10. Hut.
And of course, since we started late today, so I went quiet there again. I need to just hurry up and wrap up because, yeah, nobody's gonna be watching late night on a Friday. Although maybe late night on a Friday is the right time. Nobody definitely watched Wednesday's stream because that was too late. Literally nobody watched it. Let's see.
You were done for.
Here we have a game on Steam called Kittens of Fear. It's clearly a low-effort asset flip horror game. It's early access for $2.99, English only. Nothing to say really there. I'm gonna just try and burn through all of these. Here we have a game on Steam called Disc Space, which looks like almost like you're just playing disc golf, frisbee, or some probably just frisbee. English only. Player versus player online PvP, free to play. At a certain level, I think disc golf and frisbee, which are different things, both fail miserably outside of the real world. They are physical activities that only really make sense for that one instance. Okay. Let's go and play this. We want more amulets.
A powerful talisman.
That's what we're looking for, is we want that one amulet. And if I was going to play that strategy of that one amulet, then I definitely should just play that one amulet and only that one amulet. Gamasutra has an article here. Microsoft to begin testing Project xCloud in new regions, including Australia and Japan. In a lot of ways, this makes way more sense than selling the Xbox Series S or X to the Japanese. Particularly, I could see in Japan, where it's a small region and most people are in Tokyo, and same is kind of true in Australia. Most people are in the coastal area in Australia. That might make for decent internet in that case. I don't think that's really the case, though. Really, like I think the internet is actually pretty bad in Australia. But yeah, both of those ideas make a decent amount of sense. As this is how they want to sell games to that region instead of selling a console. I imagine the Japanese in particular don't really care about having a high-powered console gamer. I suppose it is also worth mentioning that they're seemingly just a misinformation campaign against the Xbox Series X. Either that or Microsoft has gotten very good about doing a disinformation campaign to fight actual complaints. It seems very much the case that people are blowing vape smoke, or some people have blown vape smoke into the Xbox One X to say it was smoking, whereas it seems like everybody else seems to say it runs slightly warm but not particularly hot. Which in all fairness, my new computer too is like, it's got a ton of fans in it, but it's super quiet with the new case. That was a major improvement. And even if I did end up paying close to probably $200 for a more soundproof case, it was a major improvement based on what I had before. And it doesn't seem like my computer is overheating, even being overclocked. Maybe it shouldn't be overclocked in the first place, but that's a different conversation. On the other hand, I will also say that my new computer is still kind of playing the same games, and so it's not like anything runs faster. It's not like the 60 frames per second then get doubled and you're having everything run at 2 times the speed. So new computers can definitely be overkill unless you're just planning on overkilling it a lot or having very high resolutions. Right. This. See, by the time you get this onto the field, the Untitled Seraph, that's 8th turn. And so unless somebody wants to play along with you, you're probably already dead at that point.
I envy you.
Here we have a game TechRaptor article. Cyberpunk 2077 achievements leaked to CD Projekt Red's Exasperation. Which, when I first read this title, I thought that was more of an indication that the workers were exhausted and thus they leaked the achievements. But I think rewriting this title, it is more of an indication that CD Projekt Red just has everything going wrong with them. And then I think it's worth mentioning, heck, that is a lot of cleavage. So that is questionable, since all of these people are going to be in these cyber android bodies. A lot of cleavage, a lot of sex might happen in Cyberpunk 2077, and that would be the ultimate issue, certainly. The achievements probably have spoilers in them, so I'm not going to really read them, and I wouldn't recommend other people. But yeah, there might be a lot of streamers out there that try to stream and then get community guideline strikes on YouTube or Twitch, if Twitch is even a thing by the time Cyberpunk 2077 happens. Just on the fact that there may be characters who are walking around mostly topless.
Is fighting and despair all you know? May eternal
But we
peace
shall
be
see.
yours.
Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Super Match, the Ultimate Matching Game, which it looks like it is a 3D environment of hidden objects. I've often wondered about this, is can you make a 3D hidden object game and actually succeed? In a one way, this is basically an asset flip game. Like, almost certainly all these objects are just pre-bought assets, but you're at least doing something different. How practical or realistic is this to the real world, where you'd have two things and have to match? I could imagine there's a few crazy shipping fulfillment jobs out there where you have to sort things, or there could be some scenarios, but unless you're playing with Legos or something where things are very standardized, almost never are you going to have a scenario in the real world where you're needing the skill to find two of the same thing and match. But I think, even though $4.99 might be a little expensive, I think this deserves to be on the fall list. Now I've got the hiccups. Let's see. If we put this on the field, and then the turn. Gamma Sutra has an article here. Ghost of Tsushima has topped 5 million sales under 4 months. I think we've already talked about that, but I'll mention it again. A paper cup cut on my thumb. I don't know where that came from. Let's see.
I soar the skies in the name of justice.
See, next we have a game on Steam here called Evolution, which seems to be kind of a lack of polished crawler. Seems to be maybe with some puzzle games. They're calling it an RPG simulation game. Yeah, I don't think I really would agree with that. It's free to play. It's an MMO. It's English only with in-app purchases. Yeah, that does strike me as just not good enough. There we go. And go ahead and evolve that.
You were done for. My power is weak. Time to dance.
Hit and attack and attack. Next we have a game on Steam called Ruins of Mystery, which seems to be showing statues. Seems to be like it's a massive multiplayer Warcraft clone, which we definitely haven't seen a lot of attempts of Warcraft clones in a long time. English is not supported, free Turkish only. Interesting. You don't see that. Sun Tzu's Bur Masaria. Okay, let's see what we can do now. Well, random one that costs one less. Okay.
Though I set, I will rise again.
Go ahead and hit that. And hit that. Tech Raptor has an article here. 13 remake technical issues result in apology from the developer. We fully understand the player's frustrations, Microids and Play Magic say. And it does seem like it was just like a really dumb idea. Like, I don't know why you would even want to remake a game that really wasn't relevant instead of just remaster it. It screams we were overly ambitious. It screams that they didn't think people would care, even though people will always care. It just is. Let's see. How do we want to handle this now? And I can evolve. I think that's all I can do is I just need to evolve. Evolve and clear the field.
I will rise again.
Yeah, at the end of the day though, I think that here's something worth mentioning too, is that they've put 12 when they meant 13. It really seems ridiculous. They're just saying keep an eye on the patch notes. In its present state, 13 does not meet our quality standards, and we fully understand players' frustrations. Which, then why did you release it? Particularly right now. Now would be the perfect time to delay just every game if it's not going to be perfect. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Quiet Godo, which looks like an escape the room, maybe horror game, hidden object puzzle game is what's tagged as. It's not visually polished. It's free. It's not like a student project or anything, so and let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Cyber Badminton 2020, which you have here a person wearing kind of tight spandex and a coat to play badminton, which seems a little extreme for outfits, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the professional world that is exactly kind of what they've gotten down to. Like, volleyball was not popular until they started putting them in fairly skimpy outfits, but you can kind of see there's no game here at all. It's 99 cents, English only. It looks like an NES or Game Boy era badminton game. Okay. If I played this, I could have attacked several things, but whatever. We'll see. I'm not getting anywhere very fast. Here we have a game on Steam called Strategic Mind, Spectre of Communism, which looks visually polished enough to make me think that there actually is a game here. It looks like a real-time strategy game. I'm willing to give it a follow, at least at that. $29.99 is fairly expensive, though. English full audio. No other languages, surprisingly. Communist country. Although I don't think France ever was a communist country. It was a fascist country, but I don't know about that. And I don't know if Germany was ever a communist country, really. But Chinese and Russian certainly were areas of land that once were under communist rule. Or currently are in the case of China. Let's look at the missions here, because we're not getting anywhere. Bloodcraft is the other one to try and bang your head against. At least I could have been bouncing between those two. Bloodcraft and Heavencraft. Here we have a game tagged with sexual content, which is going to be fairly shocking when you see this animation style, which looks very Western-y, and I can't say I hate it. So here we go. I'm so busy a week with Yoshimi. And you can see here you have giant head, long hair, and then incredibly tiny neck, incredibly tiny limbs, incredibly tiny hip, waist, busts, everything else. Just it's basically a Funko Pop animation style, for lack of a better term. But that definitely feels Western-y. I've definitely seen some shows on like Cartoon Network that have a very similar art style. This seems to me like what this really is, though, is it's just going to be a cheaper, I imagine, visual novel. English full audio. I'll put it on the follow list just to see of it. Dark comedy, slice of life drama with a resolution of 720. I would imagine there actually isn't anything here, and I imagine the sexual content that it's being tagged as is extremely like limited dialogue and nothing else. Like, let's just be honest here. This is a fairly new animation style to start with, so I don't know how many fans would really want to see a character like this and in kind of a state of undress or in a sexual context. It's like, this is weird. Certainly, it's just off proportion in the same way that the moe anime style is off proportion. So I could see an eventual like fetish develop around this style, but I just don't think that's right now. And in the same way as the moe art style, it's fairly easy to look at an image like this and go, oh, well, is this a 13-year-old or is this supposed to be a 30-year-old? Since they don't look human at all, the anatomy is completely off. See, here you have her in like an outfit, so that looks like an office. So that makes her look like she's 30s or 40s. Here you could easily think she was in high school, or even younger. Like in this one, she's holding a doll. In two ones, she's holding a doll. Is that an indication of age? Like, you can certainly go around in loops if you're just gonna waste your life trying to make those determinations when it really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, she's an animation. She's a cartoon. She's not real. Her true age would probably be only a few weeks old because she's probably was only drawn a few weeks ago. Just gonna end my turn here. Let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam called Runeterra Decapitation Edition, which is already mixed. It's an action RPG. A lot of videos. 25.49 single player with online PvP. I think this might be kind of like the sword game. Just same concept. Yeah, this looks too much like an MMORPG, and I just don't think there actually is a single experience. They're labeling this comeback game of the year, and it's already mixed reviewed, so it feels like it may be a re-release of something that already has been released also. Just trying to avoid bad reviews. Next, we have a game on Steam called Peg Adventures, which is Peg board games with some asset flip collectibles for doing pegboard games. Looks like something that would probably be better on a cell phone. 99 cents is not terrible. English, Portuguese, Brazil, 43 achievements makes me think it's an achievement game. Level select looks like it is for a cell phone. I feel like I've probably already covered a pegboard game on my channel. The Fox and the Hound is probably the game I'm thinking of, which they won't even mention that, I'm sure. And at that point, even the Fox and the Hound was slightly different rules and slightly more interesting experience, and it still didn't catch my attention long enough to make me really want to play all the puzzles. Pegboard puzzles, like many tabletop puzzles in games, are just things designed to waste your time because you have nothing better to do, and that concept has pretty much died with the advent of cell phones. Here we have a game called BDK, which is clearly a dark screenshot horror game, personal horror game. BDK probably being a spin on the BTK killer, bind, torture, kill. But yeah, I don't know how many people even are up to date on their serial killer lore. Here we have a political troll game, Trump versus Biden, Infinity War. This is clearly just a troll game for 59 cents. Bunch of languages, allegedly full audio in all of them. Buying a game like this almost certainly funds some political organizations' efforts to spread misinformation or affect U.S. politics in some way. And as much as I dislike the censorship on Twitter and YouTube, I think particularly on Steam, which has never been a free speech platform, it's pretended like it kind of was with Steam Direct, and that was a mistake in the beginning. I think it would be perfectly fair and easy for Valve to say, you know what, we're just not going to allow any games of a highly political nature involving actual politicians running for office right now. You could easily make it cut off that way. Any living politicians, any politicians that are currently in office or seeking office, they're just not going to let any games on around that idea. That way you can still have your World War II games, and you can still have Hitler, and you can still have Ronald Reagan and Winston Churchill and any of those famous historical people without having low effort U.S. politicians. Even if they put like a moratorium on it and said, we're just not going to allow any video games around the U.S. election the year or the 6 months before the U.S. election, and 3 or 4 months after the U.S. election, that would be easy rules to make if Valve wanted to enforce any rules at all, and they really need to. For some weird reason, Sega is re-releasing the free game that was the advertisement, Streets of Kamurocho. It's already in my Steam library. It'll be questionable to see if they're going to re-release the other couple of games that they had out, that they had available only for like that one day. Man, just like every single day they've got Phantasy Star Online content coming out. Free victory. I will take that free victory and be happy with it. Yeah, Shadowverse, more than anything, it feels like I am having to fully struggle around the idea of getting free victories. Way more than Hearthstone, and even more than Magic the Gathering Arena. Here we have a TechRaptor article. World of Darkness announces a Renegade Game Studios as its publishing partner. So they will release their games with that person. This is kind of like a Western way of doing that Japanese announcement for an announcement for an announcement, in the sense that they're not really talking about what game they're going to release next or showing any details about that game. They're just saying, hey, we've made a deal with these people, which that's very, very inside baseball. Here we have a game called Sayaga Kaku. Uses their amazing toast arts and gives you a life lesson that screams low effort Chinese game. Those don't even really sound like Chinese or Japanese names. 89 cents, English only. Yeah, so this probably is some troll joke game designed to look like an Asian game. So I take back blaming the Chinese on that one. Even though they are usually the culprit, they occasionally are innocent. Here we have a game called Filmmaker Tycoon, which is mostly negative. There was a game I know that was kind of like this called, I believe, Lights, Camera, Action. And I think in that game, you're always filming kind of an action sequence. This is English full audio. It's $24.99. It's mostly negative. I'd like to see why it's mostly negative, because it doesn't look terrible. If this images. Extremely limited and buggy gameplay does not warrant anything close to the price tag. The game is no better than a Niner clicker, where you get that when you get on any movie phone, it's equally as restrictive, and the only progression as such is to upgrade the cameras and lenses. The Tycoon elements have no substance. On the surface level, it doesn't bring anything new to the table. Like, there's a game called In the Movies, too, that they're mentioning. Man, I wish Steam would fix their recommendation engine slightly. If a game is being mentioned in the comments, it would be easy to have a new sidebar there and cross-reference things. Of course, that can be abused fairly easily also.
I'll show you something nice.
So yeah, no reason to put Filmmaker Tycoon on the fall list. Here we have a game called Viewer Games Arcade, which looks like it's probably a low effort, low polygon racing game. Free, early access, English. Third party account, Twitch required. Interesting. And it seems to be basically nothing. Minigame collection specifically tailored for Twitch streamers to play them with their viewers, which, yeah, that as a concept is not going to work. It just isn't.
How did I miss that?
Alright. Do we want to play this, or do we want to do this? Next we have a game on Steam here called Barrel Blast, which looks like it's the Donkey Kong barrel game. Donkey Kong Country barrel game in 3D. There might be enough here to justify that. It might be just a wonky physics game, but I don't know. I think a lot of this might very well boil down to the price. $8.49 is a little expensive, English full audio, but not too expensive. There very possibly is nothing here though. Put this on the follow list and see what people have to say. Okay, during this turn, any damage dealt to you is dealt to other people instead.
This bears further study. A glimpse into the future is only the beginning.
Next, we have a game on Steam called Breakout VR. Man, I just keep going quiet. Which this looks like a terrible implementation of Breakout in VR, where you can't even see what's really going on because you're looking from a sideways perspective. What a dumb concept. $8.99 English only. Nothing more needs to be said about that. See, next we have a game on Steam called Paw Paw Paw, which looks like you play as anthropomorphic animals in kind of a Castle Crasher style beat 'em up game. There might be something there. $8.99. It's another game called Garbage they're trying to advertise. They do relate this to Castle Crashers, which I think is the right thing. English full audio. See, and I don't think this is the same developers as Castle Crashers, but also I wouldn't be surprised if it is the same developers and they've just all moved on to different locations in a new company. And I can see the beginning of the end here, so we're not going to be going for that much longer. Here we have a game called Historical Games Chariot Racing, which maybe in a mini game this would make sense, but then at a certain point you almost have to make a horse racing game. A chariot race is a great example of something you might put in like Prince of Persia and then just put a cutscene or QuickTime events, which we pretty much at this point stopped seeing any kind of cutscenes with QuickTime events at all. And I think there might be a little bit of room to bring some of that back, but not go crazy with it. Next we have a game on Steam here called Cherry Island, which sounds like an adult content, but it seems to me like it's just a mix mash of trying to make like a Far Cry game where you can fly and drive and first person shoot apparently. $10.19 English full audio allegedly. Yeah, there's nothing there. And I would argue calling your island Cherry Island is not probably the best name you can give your island. You might want to be at least a little bit more subtle about it and call it like Sakura Island or something. Or some other language for cherry. Here we have a article on Untitled Chapter. Abyssal Fausto Palumbo developer interview. I have no idea if this is actually a game or if these are actual statues. Honestly, these look like statues. Yeah, these are statues. So this is board game. Yeah, that also explains why I haven't seen it. It'd be somewhat interesting to see more of these tabletop game art aesthetics and ideas get translated to PC gaming, it probably wouldn't increase the sales compared to just a standard low effort MMORPG fantasy game, but it might increase the quality somewhat. But yeah, if you really think about it, Dungeons and Dragons, Might and Magic, both of those series really are just heavily based off of Tolkien fantasy, Lord of the Rings style fantasy concepts, and they are original concepts otherwise. So there is not a large reason to license something when you can just do it yourself. Here we have a Gamma Sutra article. Twitch eyes new tools and licensing deals after, quote, understandably frustrating DMCA takedowns. Seems like the DMCA in particular or the RIAA, recording industry, is trying to destroy Twitch. And in a funny way, I'm still listening to the Beastcast, which I shouldn't, but one of the commentators, or two of the commentators, went on a large rant about the whole Twitch and copyright and the DMCA and all of that, which they have been noticeably quiet at Giant Bomb around that concept and not talked about it and not really cared about it up until this point for years. And clearly that's because their accounts were flagged as them being part of CBS Interactive, and thus either CBS Interactive was dealing with all of that or paying for it, paying for licenses or whatever. Nobody was DMCAing CBS Interactive because CBS would have actually used lawyers. Now that Giant Bomb has been bought by a different company, a much smaller company, all of a sudden they have to pretend like they are great defenders of fair use because now they actually have to use it. It's, to me, fairly obvious that their interest only went as far as their own benefit, where I would hope that any small-time YouTube content creator would certainly remember the problem of the DMCA and copyright claims and how big of a frustration and a problem it was for small creators. So if I would ever be anywhere as successful as like PewDiePie, I would hope to remember that, and I would hope to try and stop that. But we really haven't seen a lot of that. We've seen very little done as far as trying to expand or protect fair use, and usually it comes off more just as a self-promotion, like tooting your own horn type scenario. And of course you do run into the problem where even if you were going to try and help and support some small-time content creator in a copyright claim, you're going to find those small-time content creators also probably weren't using it in fair use. Like very, very few people are like me, who is just constantly, incessantly talking over games and criticizing them and commenting on them for the very specific reason to make sure every 30-second clip that you could find is going to have some commentary in it. Where Twitch streamers in general, and just to generalize here, have in the past been very, very bad about just having radios in the background and getting away with it because Twitch just didn't have the same system that YouTube did. And honestly, I would have preferred YouTube get rid of their content ID system. But yeah, there's definitely been some Twitch streamers out there that have done nothing to come anywhere close to fair use when they're playing music or playing other people's videos.
Time to get started.
And at the core of it, even if Twitch was able to fix all the DMCA problems magically, Twitch is still a pretty terrible company that has failed to support and grow a good community, and has failed to support good creators and promote good creators, and failed to have up-to-date new features. So Twitch needed to grow up quite a bit when it was bought originally by Amazon, and it's fairly obvious now that Amazon barely wants anything to do with them and will probably sell them off sooner or later. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article here. Exit the Gungeon Hello to Arms content update launches today. So, more content for Exit the Gungeon, the sequel to Enter the Gungeon, that I think plays differently. Here we have a game on Steam called I'm on Observation Duty 3. Says it's a VR game. Looks like it's a horror asset flip game. Even looks like it's the same layout of the same building that I've seen several times, or similar parts of the same building. Requires VR, $2.54, which is way too cheap for a VR game. English full audio. It's not video game related, but Chrome has decided to change its update button to actually say the word update. Probably to indicate that, yeah, there are a lot of people that don't ever get the message that they're supposed to update their Chrome browser. TechRaptor has an article here. Traveler's Tales Games is hiring for an online-focused LEGO game. That might be an interesting twist there. Like, could I abandon playing something like Shadowverse and then live stream a online LEGO game? At what point is that just too kid-friendly for me? Like, I think that there is that danger. Certainly that it would be a little too kid-friendly, or it just, I'd be playing with too many kids in general. How that actual game would play out, I have no idea. Gamma Sutra doesn't seem to be loading. I was running into a problem where a specific website was not loading on my router, and I don't know if that's a block list issue or what. So, well, no, this is wrong, because there's no way I would be getting Cloudflare 524 errors. Like, I wouldn't be getting this if Cloudflare itself was working. So that might be just Gamma Sutra's website is down. Their main server is down. PC Gamer has an article here. DOSBox Pure promises to be a new way to experience the past, designed for compatibility with RetroArch, which is interesting. Here we also see another website that I need to clean up, just in case we ever go to PC Gamer again, which there's a decent chance of that. So we're going to get considerably less Japanese news today, since Gamma Sutra is down. Here we have a game on Steam called Sublunar. That also might explain why we have just less news in general. This looks like this is they're calling it a sci-fi puzzle game. To me, it looks like a building strategy resource management game. Is there something here or that would interest me though? I don't think so. It looks a little too boring. $5.09, English only. Let's see.
deserves further study.
Next, we have a game on Steam called Dispatch Entity Astray, which, if any of the screenshots load, it looks like it's a VR game for $13.49. A lot of VR games today. English full audio, and once again, the internet just having all kinds of trouble. Like, I don't know how to really fix that so much. So yeah, here we have Dispatch Entity Astray. Some of these images loaded, but a lot of them didn't. It looks like a VR game. Let's just reload the page. See. Number of time allied followers have evolved.
Did I miss that?
Alright, so back to this game, Dispatch. Looks like it's takes place in a space station in a VR game with a lot of dark screenshots. That doesn't look very interesting. $13.49. Still, we're struggling to try and get victories. This isn't video game related, but I'm slowly talking more about Legos. This Colosseum creator has been announced, which has a massive price tag of $549.99 to build the Colosseum in its current state. An incredibly massive amount of micro 1x1 pieces certainly needed to build something, and this looks like you build out a fairly tall and sturdy base, which will increase the piece count quite a bit. It has 9,036 pieces. Unfortunately, this is one of those top tier expert sets that very few people could justify paying for. I would much prefer like the Disney Castle over this, because you'll get more variety, you'll get more minifigs. It seems like there's probably no minifigs with this set. In a weird way, this might be an indication that Lego is getting a little crazy in its pricing and a little crazy in its piece count. You could make a different scaled version of this, but then you lose even more detail. Even here, you're having to use a ridiculous amount of pieces. Now, what this set might be perfect for is if you are going to build a tan building of some sort and you just need tan bricks, getting potentially 10,000 pieces for that might not be that bad of a deal. 10 cents per piece would put you at a well, maybe not actually. 10 cents per piece would only then give you would be 10,000. So that would only be like $100. Wow. This might be a huge ripoff. But yeah, even if it's not a huge ripoff, it's just so expensive as far as Lego sets that'll be extremely rare. You'll almost never see that in store unless you go to a very high level FAO shorts or expensive high tier toy shop. Even then, I imagine it would be heavily behind lock and key. And it's really crazy thought to release that. In a weird way too, it's not like Lego has released a lot of new sets this year. So that's a weird one to offer. When I first saw it, I thought it was a custom piece, and if you had told me, yeah, somebody had made a custom set and it cost them $550 in buying pieces from other sets or from brick traders or third-party sellers, that would make sense. But for it to be an official set is crazy. So I guess that's a slight preview of what it would be like if I was going to make my YouTube channel a Lego channel. I'd be talking a lot about Lego. I'd have to potentially have a whole camera set up and rethink everything I do if I was going to actually try and put Legos together and put them on video. I mean, there probably is a channel out there already like that where it's just like you watch people put together Legos, but without talking and adding your own personality to it and having something really Lego related and interesting to say, you run into a problem in which it might take you 12 hours to put together a set, and then that content probably should be cut down to a 2-hour video. Moving on, we have a Libretro post setting the record straight on cores and their up-to-date status. This is not an article most people need to read, but they come out and say, we have started spotting a reoccurring trend of bad faith actors. It's oftentimes the same handful of people with their own disingenuous reasons for pushing this meme, continuing to make bad faith arguments that Libretro cores lag behind upstream, whatever they think that means, oftentimes that they're not even sure themselves and get it wrong, or that they're out of date. Well, I definitely wouldn't want to see Libretro cores following upstream, because upstream is like less than even beta standard. It's whatever people are uploading at that time, bugs and all. It's like zero testing. I would be more than happy for Libretro cores to always follow stable. Stable is fine. There often is a category on GitHub for like latest that is different from upstream. So sometimes that gets broken out, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, people want their games to work completely, or at least work a little bit. You wouldn't want people one day being able to play a game and the next day it just crashes immediately, which is definitely what upstream would be. But yeah, again, not an article that really people need to read. Just don't get that deep into emulation cores. You'll waste your life away. Just install like whatever you think is the most stable version and you'll be fine. Here we have a game on Steam called Super Whiplash, which looks a little low polygonal and looks repetitive in its 3D textures. Looks like it's a car combat game. $1.49 English, online player versus player. You'll just never get an audience big enough for a game like that. TechRaptor, apparently having less and less games to review and articles to publish, apparently has launched a video game history hour podcast. Which, okay. Like, at this point, though, anybody launching a podcast, you probably want to wait and see if they just pod fade after the first 6 weeks minimum, I would say. And then go back and listen to the original post and podcast. And while I still have a lot of podcasts that load and I listen to as I'm asleep, which means I don't really hear what they have to say, more and more that they have not become relevant things that I've actually gotten any information from or wanted to hear. And they've just become background radio noise. This game looks very weird and very interesting. Here we have a game on Steam called Fragile. And by the looks of it, it looks like it's a puzzle adventure game where you're playing as a girl who is either in a horrific world where she sees monsters and zombies, or hallucinating that. Here you see her with a gun. Here you see people turn into monsters. There's just a very unique visual to it. There's a lot of art style, a lot of maybe a little bit less gameplay than you'd expect. Might just be a full stealth horror experience. It's been rated very positively already, so it kind of matches the requirement. $12.74 is a little expensive. English and then subtitles for English, Korean, Russian, and Chinese, which at that point it might be a Chinese game or it might be a Korean game. It doesn't matter where it's from though, because it does look like an actual experience. And worth pointing out, not really going for the moe anime style either. It's going for more of a Korean Chinese animation style. I'm gonna put this on the fall list. I probably should put it on the wish list, but I'll give it a little bit more time just in case somebody comes back and says, no, actually this is terrible, or they change it. Although at that point, any game could be changed at any point to become worse. Here we have a game on Steam called Once Upon a Time in Gold Rush VR, which is tagged as a VR walking simulator. It looks like it is a low effort asset flip Western game, $6.99. We are seeing more Western games, which is weird because we haven't really seen any successful Western games, so I don't know why people think there's a demand for that. There probably is a small demand around things like Red Dead Redemption, but even Red Dead Redemption came and went and didn't actually blow the world up mostly because of the online gameplay and just lack of fresh content or fresh ideas in Red Dead Redemption. Here we have a game on Steam called Consequence, which looks like a low effort square blocky platforming game. $4.49 English only. I don't need to see any more to say no to that. And let's see. Here we have a Gamma Sutra article says, Judge says Apple isn't entitled to extra monetary damages over the Fortnite lawsuit, which Gamma Sutra was definitely anti-Apple on this. So maybe not particularly believe this. I didn't realize there had been any more political rambling that had even happened, and as this lawsuit is still going on and is going to go on for years, I'm sure. Here we have a job listing from Gamma Sutra. Playco is hiring a production manager. This is remote Asia and Europe only. So, interesting limitation there that you won't do business with anybody outside of Asia and Europe. Which that's a lot of places. That's like, alright, so maybe you consider Australia part of Asia? Sure. I don't know if most Asians would include Australia as part of Asia, but let's just say that's true. You're still excluding all of Africa. You're probably including Russia either in Asia or Europe, which a lot of people would say Russia's its own separate region just because it's so big that you're excluding all of South America, all of North America, North and South Pole, if anybody was living there. That's nearly half the planet. No reason seemingly given as to why you're excluding those people for a remote job. But oddly, there is kind of a good reason why those kinds of jobs are limited all over the place. It is a nightmare to figure out it's a nightmare to figure out the taxes and the payroll taxes in certain countries. Okay. And then finally we have a game on Steam here called Huma Mina, The Secret of Immorality, or no, Immortality, censored. And so I feel like I've seen a game like this, and I'm not sure if this is that game or if this is a different game. It seems like clearly this was a game that had nudity and adult content in it, and that was a big focus. And it seems like they've censored this version out, even though it's still tagged with nudity. It's $9.79. English, German, Japanese, Russian. Is there a uncensored patch? Some content would be considered girls loving girls homosexuality. It's a funny way. Torture cutscenes, torture gameplay. That they're equating it a lot to Bayonetta, which in fairness, Bayonetta also kind of had some torture cutscenes in it of the angels and the monsters you were killing. And I'm gonna put this on the follow list. I guess that's all I can really do and see what people say. A censored version of a game like this might actually be very useful. This is from the same publisher or developer that made Cinderella Escape and Cinderella Escape 2, which was the picture of the blonde Cinderella with her hands behind her back and having the kick to escape and being tied up. That's pretty much all that they've published those before this point. So where this other game came from, who knows? If there ever was an uncensored version to start with, or if there ever will be. But I don't inherently hate the idea of Cinderella Escape, because it caught enough people's attention and wasn't purely a scam, and the idea of having censored versions of those games for YouTube streamers or people that just don't want to see those contents, those parts of the contents, is not a terrible idea. Although I would argue that frankly those should just be settings. One, Valve should allow the games. Valve should allow these games to be properly labeled and sold with the adult content. And then two, it should just pop up a box at the very beginning of, hey, do you want this or do you want that? And frankly, it might very well come down to different sliders. Like, I could certainly see a case where you might say, hey, I don't want to see any guy on guy action, or I don't want to see any girl on girl action. I only want to see straight stuff, and vice versa. Maybe there's some people out there that says they don't want to see any straight stuff. They only want to see guy and guy and girl on girl action, and those different sliders. When you start to equate it to the things one could do on a site like Pornhub, where you could say, hey, I'm looking for this, and this for my specific desire. You might be able to do that in the game, at least to some small extent, in the sense that I doubt a game would have anywhere as much adult content as a Pornhub site would. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this stream. There's nothing new on Twitter. By the looks of it, we're having just incredible, terrible internet. Even Steam went down for a brief second there. Here we have an article. Epic releases thousands of what remains of Edith Finch assets for free, which, okay, is cool. So you can use that on their Unreal Engine marketplace, which gets more people to use the Unreal Engine, which may be a good thing and maybe not a good thing. Here we can also see that Unity revenue is up 53.3% year over year at the close of its first public quarter, which that's almost certainly the reason why Epic did release the assets for free. Like all the Gamma Sutra article stuff. Like, no, Gamatsu. I've not seen a single post from Gamatsu today. Interesting. it was Gamma Sutra though that was going down, and Steam that was going down, so we having major problems. There was even a time where YouTube went down, so like the whole internet's turning into a failed experiment at this point. I'm gonna have to try to play off screen and I'm just gonna struggle to get Havencraft victories, struggle to get Bloodcraft victories. At some point I need also Shadowcraft and Portalcraft victories, or I need to re-roll. Here's Gamma Sutra finally coming up. How a Guilty Gear project contributed to the collapse of Skullgirls dev Lab Zero. Yeah, and Gamma Sutra is pretty much against Mike Z, which, in all fairness, Mike Z might 100% be the bad guy in the whole Lab Zero collapse. They're claiming he tried to use Guilty Gear GGPO project as a blunt tool to leverage his continued employment in the game industry, which I don't know if you even call that a bad thing if you're literally being accused of things and you want to keep working in the game industry and not be canceled, where clearly the argument from Gamma Sutra is that he should be canceled. And I think the argument falls fairly flat for anyone in the idea of cancel culture. There's just nobody really should be canceled. People should, even if they went to jail, even if they were convicted, like, cancel culture should not be a part of that. People should be able to be rehabilitated and reintroduced into society and not just be forced into being forever in jail or forever unsuccessful. The thing I would also say about the whole Lab Zero collapse is nobody besides Gamma Sutra is really reporting on it, so it does seem to me like it probably is a much more mixed, nuanced situation than what Gamma Sutra is trying to describe. And so, yeah, my faith and my belief is just not in Gamma Sutra's twisting of the facts. Just don't buy it. Anyways, that's going to be it for this stream. Obviously, we need to end this. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.